Hey everyone, Connor here today at etrailer.com. We're going to be taking a look at the eTrailer Invisible Base Plate Kit here for our 2020 Jeep Cherokee. So here is what our base plate kit is going to look like while it's installed on the vehicle, and we don't have it attached to the motorhome here. As we can see, it has a super nice factory clean finish like install look. It's just barely going to protrude from the bumper fascia here, and the majority of it is going to insert through where our factory tow hooks were, which means there's going to be very minor modifications needed to install this. So right now, as we said, we have it in the configuration that we would just be driving around town. We have this nice little cover here that's going to prevent any dirt and debris from getting inside and causing any rust issues. And if we look to the left here, we're going to see the tab, which is our connection point for our safety cables. So when we're ready to hook up, it's going to be super easy, and what I really like about the eTrailer base plate kit here in particular is we're not going to have to worry about having any removable arms that we have to take on and put off each time we need to tow. It's going to be one less part that we could chance losing, and one less thing we have to hook up each time. The arms for our base plate kit are actually going to be installed on the end of our tow bar, and we can see these here. As you can see, they rotate freely in either direction, which is going to make hooking up on unlevel ground possible. So all you need to do to hook this up is, it's super simple here. We're going to want to rotate the tab here until we have the flat side lined up across with our base plate opening. Once we have the flat side lined up there, we can go ahead and just insert it into the hole here. As you can see, it slides in super smooth. And then in order to lock it in place, we're simply going to turn it. And once we turn it, we should see a pinhole opening line up on either side. And then we can go ahead and attach our linch pin here. And that's it. Our base plate is securely locked into our tow bar here, and we can just repeat that process on the other side. And don't forget, we have our safety chain tab there. And that's it. We can hook up the rest of our electrical and whatever else we have, such as our breakaway switch and whatever sort of braking system we're using. But that's it. It's that easy. So in regards to installation, I will say this is one of the easier base plates I've installed actually. We really don't have to do much modification to the vehicle at all, which is a huge added bonus when we have a new vehicle here. We're going to be using a lot of existing holes that are already on the vehicle. As we can see here, the majority of our base plate tab is going to come out through our pre-existing hole we have for our tow hooks. It does replace the tow hooks, but that is what we need to be able to go ahead and to connect through these opening here, which just essentially means we don't have to cut into our bumper and hack it up. So I've installed many different base plate kits before, such as those from Blue Ox, Roadmaster, and now eTrailer. And I will say, I definitely really like these eTrailer base plate kits for a couple reasons. One of them, which we mentioned earlier, is we don't have to worry about the extra component between the tow bar and the base plates. Since our pivot arms, our locking arms, whatever you want to call them, get installed directly on the tow bar. Which brings up another good point is that this kit is super adaptable. It comes ready to mount with a couple different tow bars, and it can also be adapted to other tow bars with other adapters. So it's going to give us a nice wide selection of tow bars to choose from. So now that we've gone over some of the benefits and features, and personally why I like this eTrailer base plate kit, let's jump right into installation and show you how it's done. So to start our installation today, we need to pop the hood of our vehicle, and if we see here, we have this large radiator cover. It's this plastic panel here, and it's held on by several of these push pin fasteners, which we're going to see located all throughout. There's even two at the very back on each side. So we need to go ahead and remove these so we can remove this cover from the vehicle. In order to do that, we can rotate these if we want, but essentially there's going to be a small notch between the center section and the outer section. So we're going to take a trim panel tool, a flathead screwdriver works just as well. We're just going to pop out that center section there, because once we do that, we should be able to get behind it and pull it the rest of the way out. So we need to remove all these that are holding our cover to the core support here. So once we have all of our push pin fasteners out, we can go ahead and remove this cover and set it aside. So now if we look at the front of the vehicle here, we're going to have these two Torx fasteners, one on either side. We're going to have to take a T30 bit and remove both of these. So now we need to go ahead and come to the side of our vehicle here, directly in front of our front wheels. We're going to have 3 8mm screws on the inside of our fender well here. So they're going to be a little hard to get to. You may be able to turn your wheel to give you more access, but we need to go ahead and remove these. One here, there's one here, and there's one down here, which you're really not going to be able to see, but we should be able to get those out pretty easily. Keep in mind, we have 3 on both sides. They all need to be removed. So now that we have our screws removed, we can go ahead and peel back our wheel well lining here, just enough to reveal a bolt here, which is at the top. It's basically connecting these 2 panels here, our front bumper fascia and our quarter panel. So it's going to be a bolt going downward. We're going to need a 10mm socket to remove it. It's going to be kind of hard to see, but it is there. There's going to be one on each side. They both have to come out. Now for this next part, we need to come up underneath the vehicle here. We're going to be working on either side. There's going to be 2 aluminum rivets that we have to drill out. We're going to have one here and one over here. In order to drill these out, we're going to be using a 3/16" drill bit, and as always, make sure we have the proper protection, such as our glasses and our gloves. So we're going to go ahead and drill these out now. Once we break through, it should snap out just like that. As you can see now, we have our panel clear. We have room to wiggle it down. We need to go ahead and repeat that process on the other side. Now, the next thing that needs to come out is our skid shield, which is this metal pan here on the bottom of our engine. Now we're going to have 7 of these bolts we need to remove, 3 at the top, 4 in the back actually. We're going to need a 13mm socket. So let's go ahead and take those out now. Be careful, this is a heavy metal panel, so we don't want to remove all the bolts without first supporting it. So now we're going to take a 10mm socket. We're going to remove these 7 bolts here, which are holding the bottom lip of our fascia to our core support. So before we go ahead and remove our front fascia here, what we're going to do is we're just going to take some painter's tape. We're going to align the edges of the body right here for the quarter panel and our front bumper fascia. That way we don't have to worry about nicking any of the paint or damaging the finish. So we're just going to follow that seam there between the quarter panel and the fascia. So now that we have our bumper protected here, we can go ahead and remove the fascia. We're going to start on either side. It's sort of going to be a little bit of a trick to it, so just be patient. But we do need to sort of pull down and outward at an angle here, and we should start to release the clips. So now we're going to have one connector here over on the driver's side. So as we mentioned, on the driver's side there, we are going to have this connector here we need to remove before we can pull the fascia away. Now it's pretty easy to do, but it's going to be really hard to show you how it was actually on the vehicle. So essentially this yellow tab here, you need to press it outward. You should hear it click once it's outward. And then this red piece here is actually going to pull straight up. There's a nice little grip on either side. And once you pull that up, that'll actually release the connector, and then it can be freed from the vehicle. We're going to be removing these aluminum supports we see here. There's going to be 3 bolts as well as this little retainer nut. So we have to remove all those fasteners. We're going to be using a 15mm socket to remove these 3 bolts here. We have one of these supports on each side. We need to remove them both. So once we get both of our fascia supports off, we can actually go ahead and just store these someplace safe because we won't be reusing them for this installation. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and remove our tow hooks on both sides. In order to remove these, there's going to be 2 bolts here. We'll get a 16mm socket to remove that. There's actually going to be a nut on the rear here, which essentially stops the tow hook from being able to be pulled out. In order to use this, or in order to remove that nut on the back, we're just going to sneak our hand up there. We should be able to remove the nut by hand. We just have to crawl up there with our hand. Try to remove it as best as we can. So our driver's side was actually hand loose, but our passenger side here is a little bit tighter. So we're just going to take an adjustable crescent wrench here, and we're just going to sneak that in through this little access hole here so you can get a grip on it. We should just need to make a couple turns here. We should be able to get the rest off by hand. So here's what the nut looks like. We did have to get a couple quick turns on it with our crescent wrench just in order to loosen it up a little bit. The rest of it would have been removed by hand. Now we can take our 16mm socket, remove these 2 bolts here, and our tow hook should slide out. And again, we have one on each side, and we can remove these since they won't be reinstalled. So we'll just set them in a safe place. So the next thing we need to do is we're going to take our bumper mount here. On either side, if we take a look at the bottom of this bracket here, we have a couple different options. But we're going to see this raised edge here at the bottom of the bumper support here. And basically what this raised edge is doing, it's going to interfere with our base plates. So we need to go ahead and grind this down or cut it down, whichever you prefer. We have a couple different options, as we said. First option would be to take a 16mm socket and remove these bottom 2 bolts here so we can sneak our grinder up below there and flatten the surface here. Or there's going to be 4 bolts on each side holding the actual bumper beam onto the vehicle. We're just going to go ahead and remove the bumper beam so we can do our trimming and our grinding separately while it's off the vehicle. That way we don't have to worry about nicking any of our existing components, such as the Freon lines here. So we're just going to go ahead and remove the bumper beam, and then we can do our grinding. So as you can see here, we went ahead and got the lip cut off here on our bumper beam. As you can see, it's nice and flat here as opposed to the raised contoured edges we have up above here. So we basically just took a grinder wheel here and we just sort of shaved that off here so it's nice and smooth. Then we took a little bit of paint and we just cover that up so we don't have to worry about any rust or corrosion issues. But now that that's done, we can go ahead and slap this back on the vehicle. So we have our bumper beam back on the vehicle here, and now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take one side of our base plate here. We're going to be starting on the passenger side. They are labeled for you. We're going to go ahead and mount this up on the vehicle now. Now in order to secure it, the first thing we're going to do is use these 3 holes here. The factory bolts that came out of the holes look like this, but before we want to reinstall them, we're going to put a bit of the Loctite that came with our kit on the threads of each of these 3 bolts here. So you don't need a lot, but we do want to make sure that we have a little bit on each one of these. And then we can go ahead and set our base plate up on the vehicle using those 3 holes. Now it's pretty easy to tell which way is up, which way is down. It's going to line up with the holes here, 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 and then the 2 top ones. Not going to tighten these down yet, we're just going to leave them loose so we get everything lined up. So now we're going to take another one of our factory bolts here, which if you remember, this is going to be one of the factory bolts from the tow hook. There would have been 2 here, we can use either one. We're going to use one of the factory bolts on each side. That's going to go in this hole here. In order to get that to line up, probably have to push forward on our base plate kit just a little bit. But remember, before we reinstall our bolt, I'm going to go ahead and get some Loctite on there. We're going to be using Loctite for future reference on all the remaining bolts that we reinstall. So we may need to push up a little bit on our base plate in order to get that in there. So now we're going to have 2 more bolts to reinstall here, which are going to be ones that actually come with our kit. We won't be reusing factory bolts for these holes. They're going to be the 2 holes here at the top. We're going to be using these bolts here that come with our kit, along with the flat washers. There are a couple different flat washers, so make sure you get the right size one that fits that, as well as our lock washer as well. So we're first going to install our lock washer, follow it up with our flat washer, a little bit of Loctite, and then we can go ahead and insert the bolt. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to snug up all of our fasteners here to get everything nice and tight, and then we can go ahead and torque it down to spec. These bottom 3 bolts here, we're going to be using a 15mm socket. These top 2 bolts here, we're going to be using a 17mm socket. And this bottom bolt here is going to be a 16. So the first 2 bolts we're going to torque down are these top 2, these 10mm here. Now they are going to be kind of hard to get to, so we're going to be using a swivel socket here. Then we're going to switch to a regular socket so we can get the proper torque. So we're going to switch back to our 15mm socket. We're going to go ahead and torque these 3 bolts down. Now we're going to torque our last bolt here using our 16mm socket. So now once we have this side all buttoned up, we can go ahead and repeat this process on the other side. So the next part of our installation here is to go ahead and install our safety cables here, which are essentially going to connect the base plates to the vehicle here, just a further method of security should anything happen with our hardware here. Now this is pretty easy to install. We went ahead and done this for you already, but essentially what this entails is you're going to get 2 of these for each side. We actually only used one, this little C channel here. We just took one end and we looped it through the hole on the bottom of our base plate tab, and then we stuck a cable in one end here. We went ahead and wrapped it around the vehicle's core support here, and then we came back out underneath, which you can see here. And once we've done that, we went ahead and looped it around the base plates and then connected it to the other side of our C-clamp here. So that was it, pretty simple. There's not exact instructions for this. It's pretty much whichever way you feel is going to work best for you. However, it does need to wrap around some part of the vehicle, such as our core support here and part of the base plates. So the next step of our installation here is we need to go ahead and install the ends from our base plate kit onto our tow bar. Now these couple steps here are going to vary depending on which tow bar you're going to be using. This particular tow bar is the Roadmaster Nighthawk All-Terrain. So we're going to be showing you the steps how to install these on this tow bar. So what we're going to do is we're going to need a 14mm socket and a 6mm Allen head. We're just going to go ahead and remove the bolt that holds these swivel ears onto our tow bar. We want to do that for both of our arms here. So now, again, this next step here is going to vary depending on which tow bar we have. For Roadmaster tow bars with the silver ends here, we're going to be using these 1/2-inch washers, which are about 1/4 inch thick. We're going to be using these on the inside, and then we're going to sandwich it in with our nylon washer. So it's going to install about like that, with the same combo of washer and nylon washer on the other side. However, it is a pretty tight fit, so it's not going to go in quite as smoothly as you may have hoped, but it is possible. We just have to do a little bit of adjusting and maneuvering in order to get everything to line up. So go ahead and get our bolt started here, like so, and we can push it through. Set it up like that. Now we can go ahead and try to sneak our flat washer and nylon washer down here between the arm and our ear. As you can see there, quite a bit of maneuvering here, but we were able to finally get the bolt to go through all three of those ends there. Now what we did was, since it was such a tight fit, we just took a flathead screwdriver and we just sort of began tapping down the flat washer here along with the nylon washer, making sure we try not to damage it too much. We were able to get everything aligned. Then we just went ahead and took our 19mm socket and we just began threading the bolt through everything, and it should come out nicely on the other side. Now you may need a hammer to sort of hit this in a little bit just to get everything aligned, but it is a little tricky, but definitely possible. And we're going to get our bolt threaded all the way through here. Then we can come back with our nylock nut that they give us in the kit. We can use a 19mm wrench and socket to go ahead and tighten this down. Now we don't need it super tight, but we are looking for a couple threads to protrude through the nylon and our lock nut, which you can see here. Just like that. So now that we have our base plates installed, we have everything torqued down, and we followed it up with our safety chains. We can go ahead and reinstall our bumper fascia here in the reverse order that we used to take it off with. Keep in mind, we will need to make a few cutouts here in the front of the vehicle. Depending on how your setup is, we have an electrical connector here along with a breakaway switch and air chuck here. That part of the installation is going to vary a little bit depending on what you have mounted in the front bumper here. But aside from that, everything should be as normal. We can just go ahead and set the fascia back onto the front of the vehicle now. And that's going to do it here for our look and installation of the eTrailer Invisible Base Plate Kit here for our 2020 Jeep Cherokee.